extremely fun. It's Sunrise with Craig Fronin right here on KCMX AM 880. Lively conversations around news, politics, and people, plus local news and weather every 30 minutes. We want to hear from you. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or go to KCMXAM.com. Join in the conversation by calling 541-772-8255. Sunrise, where it matters what you think.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Sunrise Show. 7 minutes after the hour, 54 degrees in Southern Oregon. Welcoming all who can listen in the sound of our voice on our live stream or follow along on Facebook and Twitter. Thrilled to have on the phone with us from the great state of Utah State Representative Ken Ivory. And he's been a representative since 2011. He's been featured on the Glenn Beck program and Fox News in his campaigning as president of the American Lands Council. I want to tell everyone, make sure you write this down, the AmericanLandsCouncil.org website. It will shock you, but it'll be a good thing if you get out there and know what's going on. And Ken, thank you so much for being on the program. I was studying all the information that there's out there, and you put on an amazing presentation, the 4 Whys, and we linked that video on our Facebook page so everybody could check that out. And between the 4 Whys and the issue of the lands, bring everybody. Of course, I want to welcome you onto the program, Ken. Thanks so much.
Hey, my pleasure, Craig. Thanks.
Related to this, it seems like we've let our guard down. We, the 11 western states, we've let our guard down. The federal government has got control of these lands. They've managed these lands. And I've talked to our congressmen and senators, and the top 10 states, anywhere from 36% managed lands in Colorado all the way up to 84% managed lands in Nevada. Utah is third in the nation with 57% managed by the federal government. Oregon is right behind it at number 4. And you wonder, okay, what's going on? And these other states went through this once before.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? So when you look at that map, if you go to AmericanLandsCouncil.org, you can see the map that shows the western states, the federal government controls more than 50% of all the land in the western states, and yet east of Colorado, it controls less than 5% of the land. And so that just begs the question. I mean, I've shared this with 8-year-olds and 12-year-olds, and you show them the map, and the first question that comes up is, well, why the difference? And so that's the question we've been asking for a couple of years, and we say, well, yeah, why the difference? Why does the federal government in a land based on protection of liberty, property, and self-governance, and that gives us peace and prosperity, why does the federal government control 50% of the land? And we heard things like, well, you just gave up that land for the privilege of becoming a state, you see. And so in your statehood contract, called an enabling act, the legislation that creates states, there are 6 words, 6 magical words, they say, where it says forever disclaim all right and title. And that's only in the western states enabling acts. And so you gave up your land for the privilege of being a state.
No, wait a minute, Ken, say that again. 6 words, forever what? Forever
disclaim all right and title. Now, Oregon's is different, right? But it doesn't matter. They lump you in. Your enabling act is actually different. It's actually stronger in terms of having the federal government dispose of your land. But it's the same situation, right? So they only look at 6 words. They don't look at the whole sentence, and they don't look at the whole document. They look at 6 words. Well, the rest of the sentence is forever disclaim all right and title until title thereto shall have been extinguished. Well, that makes a little difference in the sentence, doesn't it? And then, if you look at the rest of the document, it says 5% of the proceeds of the sales of public lands, which shall be sold, shall be paid to the state for the support of the common schools.
Now, Ken, are these federal documents or different to each state?
Yeah, so they're different for each state with some exceptions. So what happens when you have a territory, and the territory is starting to grow in population, and then it's ready to become a state. It gets to the point that it has about 60,000 people in the territory. They apply to Congress. Congress passes a bill called an Enabling Act, and the bill says if you hold a constitutional convention and if your constitution has these specific things in it, then the president will declare you a state, and that's called an Enabling Act. Now, the United States Supreme Court has repeatedly called that a solemn compact with rights and obligations that are enforceable on both sides. It's something way more than just an ordinary contract. It's a solemn compact, right? So the Enabling Act then is this act that enables the state to become a state. Well, here's what's fascinating. So what they say, what the scholars and others will say as to why the western states are controlled by the federal government, they'll say, well, you just gave up your land. In your Enabling Act, it has this magical language, these 6 words that say you gave up your land for the privilege of becoming a state, and that's only in the Enabling Acts of the western states. Well, guess what, Craig? North and South Dakota and Nebraska and Oklahoma and Louisiana and Alabama, they have the exact same language. Now, your language in Oregon, because you're a state much earlier than the rest of the western states, your language is the same as Illinois and Ohio, and the same as the Northwest Ordinance, which is described as one of the 3 most important documents in the founding of our nation.
Well, exactly
so
right. I mean, 1859 for the state of Oregon, and you're looking at North Dakota Enabling Act, February of 1889, and Utah, 1864, and all of those things. The states, I mean, you mentioned Nebraska and Illinois, and they are, Illinois is 1.8%. Is that even nuts? I mean, the lowest percentage states, less than 2% of their land controlled by the federal government. Connecticut, Rhode Island, Iowa, New York, Maine, Kansas, Nebraska, Alabama, Ohio, and Illinois, all less than 2%. Connecticut and Rhode Island, 0.4%.
Right. So let's go back and just let's make it really simple. So what we found is that it's not just the western states. The promises and that language at statehood, the promise to transfer title to the land,
yes.
the title thereto shall have been extinguished, the promises are the same for all states east and west of Colorado. They're the same. And so that argument just doesn't hold water. One of the other things that they'll say when you ask them, well, why does the federal government control the land? They'll say, well, your land is arid, therefore the federal government keeps it.
What?
Yeah, so think of Oregon, Washington, and Alaska, right? Arid? But no, seriously. I mean, seriously, I wish I was making this up. I wish I was making this up. But law professors and political science professors, your land is arid, therefore, because of the aridity, these lands are retained in the federal inventory. The political science professor from UNLV told me on the radio a couple weeks ago. Yeah, so that makes no sense as well. But, arid, therefore the federal government keeps it. But these are the arguments, Craig. So the promises are the same for the federal government to dispose of that title at statehood. Now, here's what's fascinating. You alluded to this. Illinois, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, and, of course, Craig, you know that great western state over there of Florida?
Exactly.
Right? They were as much as 90% federally controlled for decades, and they banded together. They descended upon Congress, delegations, resolutions, petitions. Florida, right? They were saying, we're the worst off of all the western states because you're not disposing of our land. We can't educate our children because you're not disposing of the land. We can't grow our economy because you're not honoring the promises.
They're choking us out. This is what I try to wake people up. I say, we've let our guard down, and I talk to the politicians as a general thing. I said, what are you trying to create? And then I answer the question sarcastically and say, a ghost town? Because you're choking us out with these lands that are supposedly being managed, and yet we sit here in a horrible situation of possible fire this season, forest fire season, and we're just hanging on to the edge rails, hoping that this doesn't occur. And all the federal politicians are preparing to throw more money. They've just added another, $4 billion to fighting fires. I'm thinking to myself, what are they thinking? So,
yeah.
Wow. Well,
Yeah,
Ken,
and so that same thing, right? So that same situation of you're controlling our land, we can't grow and expand our economies and our state and our education funding. That was Illinois and Missouri and Arkansas and Louisiana and Alabama and Indiana, and yet they banded together, same terms of statehood, they banded together, compelled the federal government to transfer title to their land. This has already been done before. Hawaii, right, 1959, they mobilized politically. The native Hawaiians said, you're not going to control all of our land from that far away. And the federal government, right in the Enabling Acts, as we hereby transfer to the state of Hawaii title to all the public lands, which are held by the United States immediately prior to the admission.
you know, I'm wondering...
It's simply a matter of political will.
Yeah, you know, Ken, I'm wondering when, and I want to get back, we've got a quick break we need to take, but I wondered how many years in the process did Illinois and Florida and Hawaii before they got their final resolution as far as being freed from that? And I want to come back. Let's get to this break and then come back with that. We've got Utah State Representative Ken Ivory on the phone with us this morning. He is actually going to be in Grants Pass this Saturday, June 7th, hosted by Josephine County Sheriff Gil Gilbertson and the Liberators. It's a free event. It's all day long, starting at 9 a.m., and you can get to liberators2004.org. Ken, he's a wealth of knowledge, and we're just getting going. And we'll take a quick little break. We'll come right back. And I'll tell you what, this is shocking to think, ladies and gentlemen, that our timber industry has been pulverized when we actually could have done something about it. So, Ken, hold on. We'll get to a break and come right back. More on the Sunrise Show when we return after this.
Will return in a moment on KCMX Newstalk 880. A little bold and extremely fun, Monday through Friday, 6 to 9 a.m. on KCMX AM 880. Lively conversations around news, politics, and people, plus local news and weather every 30 minutes. Here's Craig.
Good morning, everybody. 21 minutes after the hour, riveting interview with Utah State Representative Ken Ivory, and he's the president of AmericanLandsCouncil.org. Do yourself a favor and get a picture of what is going on related to why the 11 western states are hammered when it comes to lands managed by the federal government, choking us out when the other states in the nation have had the same exact language in their contracts and in their Enabling Act, and they've been relieved of it. And now some of the states are 10% or less, and Oregon, just Oregon, 5 times the amount of land managed by the federal government, and we all know that they're not managing the lands. Welcome back, Utah State Representative Ken Ivory. And Ken, thank you so much for your time this morning. I know you've got meetings all morning long. Let's continue with this.
It's as Ronald Reagan says, it's a wonderful time to be alive. We're lucky not to live in pale and timid times. We've been blessed with the opportunity to stand for something. It really is fascinating. So you think about what's happening right there in Oregon, right? You've got Josephine County. Sheriff Gilbertson used to have about 30 sheriff's deputies, and the revenue came from the renewable resource you've been blessed with in the forest. Well, they've shut all that down, and so now your schools are struggling for funding. Sheriff Gilbertson's gone from about 30 deputies down to about 2, I believe. And so NPR and Fox News just ran a story a couple months ago that women are literally getting brutalized and raped because they simply can't respond. I mean, they call. If they've got 2 deputies, they can staff from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, minimally, but people are calling and they simply cannot respond. And this is a direct result of the fact that you've got, 525 members of Congress, not from Oregon, deciding your land policy for you. People you cannot elect in Congress, right? 535 members of Congress, 520-something not from Oregon, deciding the land policy in Oregon and what happens to funding education for your kids, and public safety on the ground. Well, how much better that those whose lives and livelihoods depend upon the wise stewardship of that land, who are more responsible and responsive, how much better that they balance those genuine interests of environmental care and quality and access and funding education and jobs. How much better that Oregon balance those interests and Oregonians balance those interests for Oregon instead of people that you can't elect or unelect.
You know, it's amazing. And here's the next thing. With you take the natural resources that we have, and we talked about this before you came on this morning, you know, we're not just going to go out and clear cut. The environmentalists use these buzzwords, you know, clean water, clean air, clear cuts and all that. No. You know, when you back up and say, listen, we have some of the most valuable and best Doug fir and ponderosa pine in the world, and the foresters have told us this, if we don't, if they have a lifespan, then the trees fall over, they die. And so the forests are not being managed, they're not being taken care of, and it's a shock. And when you realize that is like money that's not being had, the rural system, you've got to, and we could get all into the weeds related to the birth rate and death rate of the rural counties now, but just yesterday, Ken, out of Associated Press, Multnomah, actually it's the Wapato jail in Multnomah County, they're now trying to sell it. It was $58 million. They've never been able to use it. They're going to sell their jail.
Yeah, and it's actually worse than just the revenue. I mean, revenue is critical because with the federal government cutting back on payment in lieu of taxes, by the way, payment in lieu of the taxes that states would collect if the federal government honored the same promise, right? That's what that is. Payment in lieu of the taxes we would collect if you kept the promise to transfer the lands. But it's worse than just the revenue. Environmentally, you're seeing beetle devastation all across the West because the tree densities are so tremendous. And because of that also, then you're seeing record-breaking catastrophic wildfires that, if you want to talk about clear-cutting, these so-called policies that are passing for environmentalism are clear-cutting tens of millions of acres a year all throughout the West, killing millions of animals, destroying their habitat for generations, and destroying the watershed for generations. And so, environmentally speaking, we can't afford not to change this centralized policy that's simply not working, and economically speaking as well. So you know, the federal government's at a point that it's bloated. It's $18 trillion in debt. It's overspending by $1 trillion a year. It's being managed and overrun by litigation and whatnot. It's time to step in and help and restore balance to this governing partnership for the good of the land and the good of the communities and the lives and the livelihoods that depend upon it.
You're absolutely right, and the carbon footprint and this salvage timber operation. And I'll tell you a story, Ken. And my family took a family reunion a few years back, and we drove to Colorado because that's where the central location was for the whole family, and we had a wonderful time. But as we drove into town, it was north of Denver, northwest of Denver there, we drove in, and it was this vacation community, and I look, and the hills are all brown. And the trees are all brown. I'm thinking, what is going on? What happened? And it's this rolling. It's over one hill and over the next hill and over that next hill and all into this valley. And I'm looking at this beautiful land, except the trees are brown. And I go, wow, this must have been some forest fire. I wasn't close, right? So I pull in to get gas, and I say, wow, what happened? And they go, oh, you mean the timber? I said, yeah. I said, that was the bark beetle. I said, what? Yeah. And it was disease. And they said, well, we can't do anything about it. I said, what do you mean you can't do anything about it? Well, we can't. And we had this dialogue, and that's exactly what had happened. They were a weak forest. They got into the bark beetle. Thousands of acres were ruined, and nobody could do anything about it.
Yeah, and so it's some will say, well, it's a consequence of climate change. But interestingly, climate change is not affecting the forests on tribal land or on private land that are managed, and they mitigate the damage by reducing and thinning, tending the garden, if you will. There's an article just a couple of weeks ago in EE Publishing. It's a major newswire nationally. It said what Smokey Bear might have learned if he had been raised in Indian country. And they talk about the Wallow Fire in Arizona that just devastates, ravaging through the national forest, 500,000 acres burned, protected species devastated, habitat devastated, watershed devastated. But they said but the Apache Indian Reservation that was adjacent to it, near where the fire started, was hardly even touched.
Interesting. Very interesting. And why was that?
Because they go on to talk about the practices of clearing the sight lines and on the hunting grounds and protecting the timber and reducing the fuel load. Basic generational knowledge in managing forests and wildfires reduce the hazard. They tended the garden, right? So instead of having the understory built up, and instead of having 1,000 trees per acre on tree density, they thinned the forest down. That in an Arizona forest, 40 to 50, maybe 60 trees to an acre is the carrying capacity for the water, for the nutrients, for the light that comes in, and that creates healthy trees that fend off the beetles. When you allow densities to go way beyond that, the trees get sick and they die.
It's amazing, Ken, that you mentioned that tree load per acre. The foresters here are right there with that. They're saying 100 or less, around 75 to 100 trees per acre. Right now, Southwest Oregon, between 800 to 1,000 trees per acre. How do you, and then we're talking about fighting for water. It's just amazing. Right. Ken, we've got a break coming up. I'll tell you what, you have time to wait, because I want to talk about this solution revolution coming up this Saturday in Josephine County, the fairgrounds up there. So that would be awesome if you have time.
Sure, I can stick around for a little
All right,
more.
good deal, good deal. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got Utah State Representative Ken Ivory on the phone with us this morning. He's calling from Utah. He's also the president of the American Lands Council. You want to get to AmericanLandsCouncil.org. And for this weekend, Liberators2004.org is the website for RSVP. We're just getting going. Stay tuned. More after the break. News and weather's coming up next.
Stay tuned. Sunrise will return in a moment on KCMX Newstalk 880. We want to hear from you. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or go to KCMXAM.com and go to the Talk to Us tab. Send us your thoughts. Lively conversations around news, politics, and people, plus local news and weather every 30 minutes.
Good morning, everybody. 33 minutes after the hour. Welcome to the Sunrise Show right here on KCMX News Talk 880. And thrilled to have Utah State Representative Ken Ivory on the phone with us this morning. AmericanLandsCouncil.org. Do yourself a favor and get to that website. And then for reservations for this weekend at the Josephine County Fairgrounds, hosted by Sheriff Gil Gilbertson and the Liberators, Ken will be their keynote speaker. Liberators2004.org is how you can RSVP, going on at the Josephine County Fairgrounds starting Saturday at 9 a.m. And Ken, thanks so much for your time this morning. It's shocking, because I've told many of our legislators here in Oregon and our politicians, whenever I get a chance, we have people suffering here. We have people who are losing their jobs. They have double income. One or more in the family will lose their jobs, and then they are suffering trying to make their house payments. The foreclosures at an all-time high. We had numbers, and the Oregon regional economists talking about how Oregon got hit so hard with loss of jobs, loss of revenue, and trying to bounce back. And yet we've got these incredible natural renewable resources that could provide a living wage job. Here, Seattle has just hit this minimum wage job of $15 an hour, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, you got $25, $30, $35 an hour job out in the forest, and people are so frustrated. What can people do?
Well, okay, so first it's important to understand that this is not a partisan issue. We all want to better care for the environment. We
Right.
don't want our forests burning down and millions of animals, hundreds of millions of animals being burned and habitat and watershed destroyed. That's what we're getting currently. No one wants that. So we can keep doing the same things over and over again, or we do something different. This is the only solution big enough to better care for the land, grow the economy, fund education. Promises are the same. It's already been done before. So here's what we do individually. Number one, we've got to get educated. And so AmericanLandsCouncil.org. We put so much information on there. You can see enabling acts side by side. The key point promises are the same. It's already been done. So we've got to get educated, and then we've got to educate others. Craig, think about this. Can you imagine Benjamin Franklin living today? He wouldn't be setting type one at a time to do a broadside to send out, 100 or 200 copies. He would have the most incredible Facebook page you've ever seen, right? Thomas Paine would have a Twitter account that would just knock your socks.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So we have the ability we could reach thousands and tens of thousands before we even get out of our pajamas in the morning. And so we've got the opportunity to get educated, to educate others. The second is to donate. We've got to engage money and manpower. We've got people that are donating and helping and getting things involved with the American Lands Council so we can move that message forward. And so if you want to get involved with time, let us know. Sign up on the website, let us know. If you have resources and you can contribute a hamburger and a Coke or a dinner and a movie a month, do that.
Exactly.
And then the third one is delegate, right? So educate, donate, delegate. And delegate is critical. And this is what you were talking about. In our system, the power resides with the people. We hire our representatives. And so we can either hire people with nice hair and they sound really cool, or we can hire people that understand that the promises are the same, that property is critical to prosperity and peace and better care for the lands. And we hire those people. If you get on the website, you'll see some really cool things happening in Montana where every candidate stopping point, they get asked, do you understand that the promises are the same for the federal government to transfer our land? Do you understand it's already been done before? What are you going to do specifically to help make this happen? On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you support this, and what are you going to do to make it happen? And they're getting asked that everywhere they go in Montana and Idaho and Nevada and Arizona and Utah. And that's where it starts. We have to take ownership. Nobody's coming to our rescue. This is a government of the people, by the people, for the people, not of the bureaucracy, by the bureaucracy, for the bureaucracy.
Exactly.
And tolerate that.
Exactly. Ken, we've got a call coming in, but I want to ask you about the governors in these states. Have they stepped up and learning that? But let's get this call. Good morning. You're live on the Sunrise Show. Do you have a question for Utah State Representative Ken Ivory?
Craig, that question you just asked is somewhat similar to mine. I'm just wondering if, since this meeting is so extensive and very welcome to somebody out of state, are any of our local people politicians or our federal politicians going to be in attendance? Wyden, Merkley, Walden, and local representatives going to be in attendance at this gathering?
Yeah, good question, and I'm not sure, but I would hope that they would. So
yeah, I'll bow out.
Okay.
This is one of the best opportunities people have right now is to call them. Remember, we're the boss in our system. The people are the boss, and so if you're the boss, and you are, call those representatives that you hire and invite, encourage, suggest, maybe even demand that they get a little more knowledge on this subject and show up.
Exactly, and we had Representative Dennis Richardson, who's a common guest on our show, and he said, Craig, when I was in Washington, D.C., I got to the lobbyists, I got to the federal government about these lands, and they said, well, I'm sorry, but if you're not the governor, I hate to tell you this, we just really can't do much, we really can't help you. And he went, okay, well, thank you. He said, with all due respect, sir, I mean, he was talking to the state representative, and he said, we need to hear from your governor. I went, wow. And he said that. So it was like, that's why I wanted to find out if the governors of these 11 western states, how strong are they? Do they understand? And are they going to bat for these western states? What have you seen so far, Ken?
Well, so 5 states have passed legislation signed by their governors, right? Our governor in Utah signed my bill, the Transfer Public Lands Act. But this is a process of education. If you're the governor, you're a team of one, right? In the legislature, I have 103 other colleagues. I can fade into the trees if something happens.
Right.
The governor's out on the field all by himself. And so the more that the people are assembled on that field of battle, so to speak,
right,
standing with the governor, the more strength, the more political power the governor has. And so it really is a matter of us rallying around, hiring and inspiring the leaders that have the knowledge and courage to battle for these only solutions big enough. In fact, I've spent time with Dennis Richardson on this very issue, and he's very up to speed on it.
Oh, well, that's excellent. I mean, it's shocking. We talk about letting our guard down, locally, and the fact that because we had an incredibly vibrant timber industry. In fact, that's what Josephine County, the county that you're going to go to, they did not have property taxes. The property taxes, everything was paid by timber receipts. And so when that went away, they now, came back into it. I think it's 58.5 or 59 cents per thousand. Now it's horribly low in comparison to what some of the other counties would be. And Jackson County is like $2.71 or something like that. It's gone up a little bit now, but you can see the comparison. And because they were so timber rich, the bottom has completely gone out. And Ken, I saw and stood there in horror as Bill O'Reilly on Fox News talked about a woman who had a 911 call who was being attacked, and the 911 operator says, well, I'm sorry, she was calling in the evening. She said, I don't have anybody to send to you until 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. And she said, what can you do? Can you leave? And the person says, well, he's my ex-boyfriend. He's parked in the driveway. My car's in the garage. I can't get out. And she goes, well, can you ask him to leave? And she said, I've already done that. Well, he came in, suffered from drugs and drug addicts and that kind of stuff, and he ended up raping her. He ended up being caught and cited, and he's now in prison. But to have this call on 911 on national TV, and Bill O'Reilly was just shocked. He goes, what's going on out there? It's like the 1800s or something. And they said, well, they want to save the salmon in the water. And that was it.
Yeah, NPR covered that story as well. And those types of consequences are happening all over the West. Communities are dying. Communities are literally dying. In Montana has the exact same document that created their state as North Dakota. Not just the same language, it was the same document, Craig, that created North and South Dakota, Montana, and Washington. And yet they dispose of the land for North and South Dakota, but not Montana and Washington. And people in Montana, because their timber harvests were shut down as well, they're leaving their communities to go to North Dakota. They have a $6 billion rainy day fund. They're putting billions of dollars into educating their children, billions of more into school buildings and roads, because they control locally their land and resource. So people are leaving Montana for jobs because they don't have any in their own community, and now the seniors have no one to care for them. The communities are dying. There's no public services. It's the same story all around the West, Craig, because we've gotten away from the fundamental principles that government exists to protect liberty, property, and self-governance. And until we get back to that, where we understand that people at the most local level understand how to manage the long-term best interest of their resource, we're going to keep getting these kinds of results. And so it's time for us, government of the people, by the people, to stand up and hire and inspire the leaders who have the knowledge and courage, like Democratic Senator Thomas Hart Benton did in the 1850s. He's the one that stood up and battled and taught his colleagues in Congress, went out to the public, taught the public, and then they went and got leaders that would get the job done. And they passed legislation that did transfer the lands to Illinois and Missouri and Arkansas and did dispose of those lands. It really is up to us.
Ken, it's wonderful of what you're doing with American Lands Council. Everyone can go to that website. I strongly encourage everyone to just go AmericanLandsCouncil.org. Check that out. All of the contact information. It's rich with information, and it's all documents related to what our country is founded on, existence of it. I've got some of it. It's amazing with the enabling acts on the different states and the unreserved public lands, granting, how they were granted, the process, the videos on there. And I posted one of the videos on our Facebook page last night, Ken, as well. I'm so encouraged that you're going to be here in Grants Pass this weekend. And, I just can only say hoorah, to what you're doing. And 11 Western states have got to just say enough is enough, especially with this horrific fire season coming upon us. And just, what are the folks in Utah saying? Are they just beyond themselves at this point? I mean, Utah...
Well, they're rallying, right? They're rallying together. We've got school boards around the state passing resolutions supporting the transfer of public lands, chambers of commerce, cities, counties, all passing resolutions supporting the transfer of public lands. In fact, on the website, AmericanLandsCouncil.org, under the Resources tab, you'll see a tab called Resolutions, and you'll see resolutions all around the United States supporting this. And so that's something people can do as well. Get your city, get your school board, get your Chamber of Commerce, get your Farm Bureau to pass resolutions supporting this. That leverages your voice to give knowledge and courage to our leaders.
That's fantastic. No, it really is great, and we want to have you back. Of course, this is such a deep subject, but I keep telling folks we've let our guard down, and what do we want to create? We have a chance to make a stand, and it's time to do it. Enough is enough, I say.
Exactly right. This is a wonderful time to be alive. We're lucky not to live in pale and timid times. We've been blessed with the opportunity to stand for something.
Wow. Well, Ken, I know you got to get going. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, State Representative for the great state of Utah, Ken Ivory, on the phone with us this morning. He's got to get back into meetings and everything, but you can get his website, AmericanLandsCouncil.org, and then he will be in Grants Pass this weekend, June 7th on Saturday, for the Solution Revolution, starting at 9 a.m. at the Josephine County Fairgrounds, being sponsored by Josephine County Sheriff Gil Gilbertson and the Liberators. And we'll also post contact information because you can get RSVP to the Liberators2004.org. It's free. You won't believe it. I've seen Ken's video, and Ken, you're just a wealth of knowledge, and so thankful that you're out there championing the fight. I mean, it makes no sense when you think about the people that are suffering and the good work that Oregonians have done, and the folks from Utah, why let it burn and go to disease? I just don't get it. It just makes no sense.
Well, thanks, Craig. Things are moving. We'll look forward to being out there with you. Appreciate your time.
All right, take care. Wow.
Bye-bye.
Unbelievable. Utah State Representative Ken Ivory, and we'll be blessed to have him in our region on Saturday. More of that coming up. We'll be talking about that all week to get folks out there. We've let our guard down. We have thoroughly let our guard down, and what are we going to do about it? We have the opportunity. The language is there, the contracts is there. Now it's just a matter of getting the resolutions. It's fantastic. Let's get a quick break in. We'll come back. More on the Sunrise Show. I don't know about you, but that just gets me all fired up. That just gets me all fired up. When you think about the great works that we can do, if the federal government will just get out of the way, I mean, we could pay them. We could literally generate revenue for the federal government instead of them just in a holding pattern losing money. What is that all about? Oh, speaking of governments losing money, what about the state of Jefferson? Oh, they're voting on that today. We'll be right back.
Shake your body down to the ground, let's dance, let's shout. Shake your body down to the ground, let's dance, let's shout. Shake your body down to the ground.
Stay tuned. Sunrise will return in a moment on KCMX Newstalk 880.